All right, let's dive into the pretty wild world of Philippine politics. There's a massive billion peso budget scandal blowing up right now. But the source material we're breaking down today suggests the story you think you know, well, it might just be a carefully crafted illusion.
And wow, this quote from our source really just sets the scene perfectly, doesn't it? It paints a picture of a full-blown political firestorm where reputations are being torched and the blame game is, let's just say, incredibly intense.
And right in the middle of that firestorm is one guy, House Speaker Martin Romualdez. If you've been on social media or following the headlines, you've seen it. He's been branded the Pork Barrel King, the #1 villain in this whole saga.
But here's the question. Is he really the one who deserves all the heat? In this explainer, we're going to break down the source's argument by putting that public story head-to-head with what the paper trail actually says. So let's start with the narrative everyone's been hearing. So the basic story is pretty simple. A huge budget scandal has broken out over billions of pesos in, let's call them, questionable insertions. And if you're just casually following along, it seems like one name is attached to all of it: Speaker Romualdez.
But this is where it gets really interesting. Our source material basically stops and asks, hang on a second, is all this public anger truly about accountability? Or could it be a very clever, very well-executed bit of political misdirection, a giant smokescreen?
To get to the bottom of that, we have to understand how the budget process even works. We need to decode what the source calls the pork pit, the place where all this alleged mischief really gets started. Okay, so the key player here is something called the Bicameral Conference Committee, or just BICAM for short. Now, this is where a select few from the House and the Senate get together to finalize the national budget. And our source has a pretty vivid name for it: the ultimate pork pit. It's supposedly the place where these multi-billion peso insertions just magically appear at the last minute. So you really got to get this flow. The budget journey starts in the House. Then it goes over to the Senate where they make their own changes. But the final and most crucial stage is the BICAM. That's where they mash the two versions together. And according to the source, this is where the real magic, or maybe mischief, happens, a lot of the time behind closed doors. And right here is where the whole story takes a very sharp turn, because the source argues that if you really want to find who's behind these insertions, you need to stop looking at the speaker and start looking for the Senate's fingerprints. The central claim is pretty bold. It's that while the public narrative is stuck on repeating Romualdez's name over and over, actual testimony and reports are pointing the fingers straight at several very high-profile senators.
And the source doesn't just make vague claims, it gets specific. As you can see right here, it links senators like Jingoy Estrada and Joel Villanueva to a 355 million peso flood control scheme, complete with a 30% commission. And then there's Senator Chiz Escudero, who is tied to a staggering 142.7 billion pesos in insertions, with the source even citing details like him allegedly being spotted on CCTV near the House while the final budget was being hammered out.
Okay, so this begs a pretty big question, right? If the evidence presented in the source points towards the Senate, why on earth is all the public fury being directed at the House Speaker? This brings us to the politics of blame and the alleged strategy behind the scapegoating. It's the multi-billion peso question, isn't it? If the paper trail leads elsewhere, why is Speaker Romualdez the one facing graft complaints and getting tagged as the king of pork? Well, get this. Here's a crucial piece of info from the source that really complicates that simple public narrative. Speaker Romualdez, he wasn't even an official member of that all-important BICAM committee where these insertions supposedly happened. So what you end up with are two totally different stories. The public narrative is simple, it's catchy, it fits in a headline. Romualdez is the pork barrel king. But the source claims something else entirely, that this is a deliberate political play, something it calls a DDS political tactic, designed to manipulate public opinion for a very specific reason. So what is this so-called trick? Well, according to the source, it starts with a simple foundation: exploit public ignorance. Let's be honest, most of us don't know the nitty-gritty details of the budget process, especially the role of the BICAM. And that knowledge gap? It's really easy to manipulate.
Step 2 in the playbook: simplify the villain. Look, instead of trying to explain a complex procedural fight with lots of different people involved, you just create one single, easy-to-hate bad guy. Bicameral procedure is complicated. Romualdez is a name, a face, and a very simple hashtag.
And the final step? The grand finale?
weaponize all that outrage. Once you've created that simple villain, you can aim all the public's anger and frustration right at that one person. This lets you achieve your political goals while the real, more complicated issue just gets ignored.
And what are those goals? Well, the source alleges it's a kind of two-for-one deal. First, you protect senators allied with Vice President Sara Duterte from any scrutiny over their own alleged budget insertions. And second, you weaken Speaker Romualdez, who just so happens to be a key ally and the cousin of the current president, Bongbong Marcos.
So really, what this all boils down to is a battle between actual information and deliberate misdirection. And it makes you wonder, when a story gets twisted this badly, who really wins?
The source just nails its entire argument with this one incredibly sharp observation. Pork is bipartisan, but blame is partisan. Think about that. It means politicians from every side of the aisle might be benefiting from these pork barrel projects, but the blame for it? Oh, that can be aimed like a laser beam for pure political advantage.
So, I think the biggest takeaway from this analysis is that the scandal is about something much deeper than just money or corruption. It's really about the immense power of controlling a story, of framing a narrative to protect your friends and absolutely dismantle your enemies.
And that leaves us with one last, and I think really critical question to chew on. In a system where the whole conversation is just about finger-pointing and strategic scapegoating, who's the one that actually pays the price? When politics becomes nothing but a blame game, who really loses?